I am Margaret Blake, 61 years old, and I've spent most of my life working harder than anyone thought I should. For 30 years, I built Blake Supply from a tiny operation in my Cleveland garage into a company worth millions. When I signed the final sale papers last spring, my hands trembled, not from fear, but from the strange quiet that follows years of noise. The buyers wired $2.8 million into my account on Thursday at 9:14 a.m. I checked the balance twice, whispered a thank you to myself, and stepped outside into the kind of sunlight that makes you feel brand new. I didn't want a sports car or a cruise. I wanted something that felt earned, a home where I could hear the waves and the wind instead of the hum of fluorescent office lights. 2 weeks later, I found it, a pale gray beach house on Sullivan's Island, South Carolina. I paid $1.72 million for it, cash. It was worth every cent. The house had 4 bedrooms, tall white trim, cedar shingles, and a porch wide enough to hold 3 rocking chairs and a lifetime of peace. The master suite faced the Atlantic, with windows so large they framed the sunrise like a painting. For the first time in decades, I didn't need an alarm clock. The ocean would tell me when to wake. On moving day, I placed my mother's blue quilt at the foot of the master bed. I brewed coffee, opened every window, and listened to the gulls crying over the waves. I could smell salt in the air, the kind of scent that makes you feel both small and infinite. I had plans to read again, to write, to plant lavender along the fence, and maybe, if the mood struck, to start a small side business helping women transition out of corporate burnout. My peace lasted exactly 5 hours. At noon, a silver SUV rolled up the driveway. My son, Daniel, stepped out with his wife, Kyra, her parents, Victor and Elaine, and a cooler full of drinks. They hadn't called. Daniel smiled widely, like a politician at a ribbon-cutting ceremony, and wrapped me in a hug that felt more like possession than affection. "Mom," he said, "this place is amazing. We'll take the master suite. It'll be easier for you if we handle the stairs."
He didn't ask,
he announced. Victor nodded approvingly, talking about how sensible it was for older folks to start planning assisted living early. Elaine smiled in that thin way people do when they're pretending kindness. Kyra asked where the towels were, like she already lived there. I said nothing. I sipped my coffee, smiled politely, and pointed them toward the guest rooms near the dunes. They ignored me and carried their bags upstairs. I watched from the hall, silent, recording the moment in my mind like evidence. When they spread their clothes over my bed, over my mother's quilt, I took photos. Every bag, every face, every timestamp. Then I created a folder on my phone and named it House Day 1. By sunset, my home no longer smelled like salt and coffee. It smelled like seafood, cologne, and entitlement. Daniel had ordered oysters, shrimp towers, and champagne, all charged to my account. A dozen strangers filled my living room. I recognized none of them. I stood in the corner, notebook in hand, jotting details like I was back at work. 7:48 p.m., Victor boasting about managing investments. 8:15 p.m., Daniel is talking about running family assets. 8:42 p.m., Kyra calling the master suite our room. At 10:32 p.m., Daniel climbed onto a chair, glass in hand, and gave a toast that curdled my stomach. "To my mom," he said, slurring slightly. "She's finally slowing down, and I'll be managing the property for her now. You'll see this place on my social soon. Our family's new coastal investment." Applause. Laughter. Camera flashes. I kept my face calm. I took another photo, this time of him on the chair, my chandelier glowing above his head. Then I slipped away to the small study at the back of the house, a quiet room with a daybed, a desk, and one locked drawer. That would be my room now. I closed the door, turned off my phone, and listened to the party muffled through the walls. I stared at the blue light blinking on my security camera hub. I had installed them not for protection, but for peace of mind. Now, they would serve a different purpose. I thought about all the years I had spent working to give Daniel opportunities, private schools, college tuition, a car, and his first down payment. I had believed generosity would teach gratitude. I had been wrong. Lying there, I thought about what Victor said earlier about assisted living, about how Daniel had introduced himself to my guests as the manager, about the way Kyra had called me dear, as if I were a fragile antique instead of a woman who built a company from nothing. I felt the anger rise, but I didn't let it spill. I just breathed. 1, 2, 3, until I reached 43. That's how long it took for calm to settle back in. Calm is a decision. So is documentation. I made both that night. Before I fell asleep, I wrote a short list in my notebook. 1. Verify deed and ownership records. 2. Photograph everything. 3. Speak only through paper. 4. Keep calm. Always calm. I knew then that this wasn't just about a house. It was about boundaries, something I had spent a lifetime postponing. My son and his in-laws had mistaken kindness for weakness, and they were about to learn that peace does not mean surrender. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. The ocean shimmered like liquid gold beyond the windows. I brewed coffee and stood barefoot on the porch, the cool board steady beneath my feet. From upstairs came laughter and running water, sounds that didn't belong here. I opened my notebook and wrote one final line under my list. The calm woman wins in the end. And I meant it. The next morning, I woke before the sun touched the horizon. The air was heavy with salt, and the sound of waves carried through the open kitchen window. The house felt different, like it was holding its breath. I brewed coffee, tied my hair back, and looked around at the champagne bottles still scattered on the porch rail. My home had been turned into someone else's playground overnight, and I intended to reclaim it quietly, one document at a time. I dressed neatly, slipped my notebook into my leather tote, and drove into Charleston. The streets were calm, lined with palm trees glistening under the early morning light. At the Charleston County Register of Deeds, I requested certified copies of my property deed and the closing statement. The clerk, a kind woman named Lila, stapled the documents and slid them across the counter. "Keep these safe," she said. "You'd be surprised how often family gets messy when money's involved." Back at the house, I started my small war of preparation. I set up 2 new security cameras, one over the front door and another near the garage. I added a motion tracker inside the hallway and a cloud backup that stored recordings offsite. No one would twist this story. Then I called my banker, Julia Torres at Seaside First Bank, a sharp woman with a memory like a ledger. I asked her to flag any unusual activity tied to my name, address, or accounts. She said she'd set up alerts for property-related inquiries or sudden withdrawals. Within the hour, she emailed me a summary. I printed it and placed it into a manila folder labeled House, Ownership, and Security. By early afternoon, the evidence of chaos had grown. Empty liquor bottles lined the porch, and someone had left a half-eaten burger on the railing. Inside, a stranger, someone I didn't recognize from the night before, was asleep on my living room sofa. I didn't wake him. I simply photographed him, timestamp and all, then walked back to the kitchen to document every footprint on the marble floor. Calm. Always calm. At 3 p.m., the doorbell rang. Standing outside was a woman in a navy dress holding a stack of glossy real estate brochures. Her name tag read Harper Quinn, Atlantic Coast Realty. She smiled brightly and said, "I'm here about the Sullivans listing. Daniel told me to stop by for photos and to discuss the pricing strategy." I blinked once. "Listing." She nodded. "He said you're moving into assisted living soon and the family wants to sell before the market cools. He mentioned you'd already approved it." I could almost hear the ocean quiet outside, as if even the tide wanted to listen. I invited her in, poured her a glass of water, and sat across from her at the dining table. Then I pulled out my deed, my license, and my printed documents. "This house isn't for sale," I said softly. "And I'm not moving anywhere." Harper's face drained of color. She scanned the papers, then looked at me again with a mixture of disbelief and sympathy. "Ma'am, I'm so sorry. I had no idea." "He seemed completely authorized." "I'm sure he did," I said, sliding her the documents to review. "Would you mind forwarding me any emails, call logs, or texts from him? I'd like to have a clear record." Within minutes, She sent screenshots of Daniel's messages, him posing as the property manager, using phrases like our home, family estate, and transition planning. I thanked her for her time and watched as she quietly left, still shaking her head. I printed every message, highlighted the key lines, and added them to my folder. That evening, as the sun sank into the sea, I called my attorney, Olivia Price from Ashford and Price Law Firm. She and I went back nearly a decade from when she defended my business against a faulty supplier claim. When she answered, her voice was calm, efficient, and reassuring. I gave her the entire rundown from the unannounced arrival to the unauthorized listing attempt. Olivia paused for a long moment before replying. "You've done everything right so far," she said. "Keep the cameras running and don't confront them tonight. People like this tend to dig their own hole when given rope. Tomorrow morning, I'll have a private investigator at your door, Grace Porter. She'll verify your footage, document all property activity, and start background checks on anyone involved. Let the facts do the talking." "Should I say anything to Daniel?" I asked. "No," Olivia replied. "Silence unsettles people who expect control. Just watch, record, and wait. Noise always comes before quiet." By nightfall, the music started again, this time louder. I peeked through the blinds and saw colored lights flashing from the back deck. Daniel had hired a DJ. The crowd had doubled. I heard him boasting into a microphone about how he'd turned the family beach house into an exclusive event property. Guests were tagging the location on social media, using the caption "at Blake Beach Retreat," managed by Daniel Blake. I didn't interrupt. I simply walked to the porch steps and filmed 30 seconds of him speaking, making sure the sound was clear. Then I took photos of the wristbands they were handing out at the gate, along with the small cash bar set up beside my lemon tree. Even the bartender didn't realize it was my home. Inside, I labeled a new folder on my computer, Evidence, Unauthorized Occupation. I uploaded every file, timestamp, and email. The digital trail was undeniable. By 1:16 a.m., when the last song faded and the laughter slurred into silence, I gathered the trash. Every broken plastic cup, wristband, and flyer went into one bag. I sealed it, dated it, and stored it in the laundry room closet. Then I sent Olivia and Grace secure links to all of it, photos, logs, and Harper's text messages. I received 2 short replies, "Received" and "Good work." I slept in the study again, door locked, earplugs in. The walls shook faintly with the ocean's rhythm. I stared at the soft green glow of the security monitor until my eyes blurred. Somewhere upstairs, Kyra's laugh turned into a sharp whisper, followed by Daniel's voice saying something about control. I didn't move. I just listened until it all went quiet. When dawn broke, I made pancakes and coffee for one. Daniel came downstairs, still half asleep, acting as though the night had been normal. He mentioned a beach bonfire and brunch for 30 guests that day. I told him calmly, "We'll be having a house meeting at noon with documents." He smirked, barely looking up from his phone. "Noon doesn't work, Mom. The caterer arrives at 11:45. I smiled, wrote his words in my notebook, and underlined them twice. Calm and paper. Always paper. By late morning, the sky was silver with soft clouds that promised rain. I had spent the early hours reviewing my notes, checking every photo, and printing copies of my deed and medical letter. The ocean outside looked calm, but my house felt tense. I had planned to speak with Daniel at noon, to end this quietly, with facts, not emotion. But trouble arrived first. At 11:30 a.m., the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, 2 sheriff's deputies stood on the porch, hats in hand. Behind them, I saw Daniel, pretending concern so convincingly it almost made me laugh. "Ma'am," one deputy said, "we received a welfare report. Someone claimed there's an elderly resident here who may be confused and unsafe." My heart slowed to an icy calm. I asked, "And the report listed my name, didn't it?" "Yes, ma'am." I stepped aside and gestured for them to come in. I handed over my driver's license, my certified deed, and a signed letter from my physician, Dr. Tamara Ellis, stating I was fully capable of independent living. I even showed them the email from Harper, the realtor, confirming Daniel had tried to list my property without consent. While they reviewed the documents, Daniel stood near the stairs, wringing his hands dramatically. "She's been under a lot of stress," he said softly, eyes downcast like a stage actor. "We just want her safe." The younger deputy looked up from the paperwork. "Sir, this house is owned by Ms. Blake," he said firmly. "And from what I see, she's anything but confused." That shut him up. Then the older deputy asked the question I had been waiting for. "Would you like to trespass on anyone on the property?" I met his eyes. "Yes, all of them." At 12:07 p.m., I handed each person a written notice. Short and professional. "Your guests. Your invitation is revoked. You must leave by 2 p.m. or law enforcement will remove you." I made 4 copies, one each for Daniel, Kyra, Victor, and Elaine. I even gave a copy to the caterer and DJ who were scheduled for the day's party, stating clearly that the event was canceled by the owner. The deputies stood watch while I delivered the papers. Daniel's face turned red. "You can't do this," he snapped. "You're my mother." Victor puffed his chest and said, "She's unwell. You're going to regret this kind of public embarrassment." Elaine crossed her arms and added, "Family doesn't treat family like this." I looked at each of them and spoke evenly. "Family doesn't try to steal a house either." Kyra's lip trembled, tears forming, but I could see the calculation behind them. She was waiting for me to soften. I didn't. Daniel tried one last performance. "You're making a mistake. You need someone to manage things for you. This property, the finances." The older deputy cut him off. "Sir, you need to step outside." For the next 90 minutes, the house turned into a storm of motion. Suitcases rolled down the stairs. Voices rose and fell in angry waves. The deputies remained calm, their presence making sure no one crossed a line. I stayed near the front porch, standing under the ceiling fan, watching the chaos unfold. At 1:45 p.m., the driveway was full of cars and half-packed boxes. Kyra dragged out a suitcase, sobbing loudly enough for the neighbors to hear. Daniel avoided my eyes, barking orders at Victor about which car to load first. I caught snippets, lawyers, unfit, rights, but they sounded like desperation, not power. Right on time, a silver SUV pulled up. Grace Porter, Olivia's investigator, stepped out in black jeans and a blazer, holding a body camera. She nodded at the deputies, then walked past Daniel without a word. "Ms. Blake," she said, "I'm here to document the property and verify the situation." Grace moved through every room like a quiet storm. She photographed the spilled drinks, the trash, the damaged railing, and the makeshift bar in my backyard. In one corner of the living room, she found something I hadn't noticed, a small black router tucked behind the TV stand. The network name flashed on the screen, House Manager. "Installed within the last 48 hours, she said. "Unregistered network, unsecured." She powered it down, boxed it, and labeled it as evidence. Good move bringing me in. At exactly 2:03 p.m., the last of them were escorted off the property. Daniel turned back once, face twisted with rage, but he didn't say a word. The deputies waited until the final car pulled out of the driveway. When they left, one of them tipped his hat and said quietly, "Good luck, ma'am. You handled this better than most." By 3 p.m., silence filled the house again. I could finally hear the ocean. I sat at the kitchen island with a cup of tea and called Olivia. She congratulated me for staying composed and told me she had already drafted a letter summarizing the day's events. "This will protect you if he tries anything else," she said. "And trust me, he probably will." I nodded. "Then I'll be ready." After the call, I decided it was time to make the house work for me, not against me. I searched for professional rental management companies in Charleston and found Atlantic Retreat Properties. The director, Natalie Chun, agreed to meet me that evening. At 5:30 p.m., she arrived with a clipboard and calm eyes. She walked through the house slowly, inspecting everything with quiet precision. "You have something special here," she said. With some deep cleaning and staging, it could earn a steady income without you lifting a finger. She gave me a clear plan. Deep clean and minor repairs, $2,900. Fresh linens and new towels, $1,200. Professional photography, $750. Her company would manage bookings, maintenance, and guests for an 18% commission. With her seasonal rates, the house could earn between $82,000 and $96,000 net per year through vacation rentals and small private events. For the first time in days, I smiled. Let's do it. We signed the agreement before sunset. Natalie scheduled cleaners for the next morning. The house that had been chaos would soon become an asset again, steady, predictable, and peaceful. At 6:10 p.m., as I sat on the porch with my tea, an email notification flashed on my phone. It was from Daniel. The subject line read, "Urgent, legal action." He had written a long letter through a lawyer, claiming I was being manipulated and that he intended to petition for temporary conservatorship. He accused me of declining mental health, of being under outside influence. He even copied Victor and Elaine, who added their own concerns about my well-being. I forwarded the email to Olivia. At 6:22 p.m., she replied with a 2-page letter of her own, calm, factual, devastating. Attached were my doctor's note, the welfare check record, the deed, the realtor's report, and screenshots of Daniel's social media posts calling himself property manager. She ended her response with one sentence that made me exhale in relief. Any further attempts to interfere with Ms. Blake's legal ownership or finances will be treated as financial exploitation under South Carolina Code Section 43-35-85. I printed that email, dated it, and slipped it into my folder. Then I closed my laptop, stepped out onto the porch, and watched the tide rise. The house was quiet again. The peace I had earned was returning, one wave at a time. The first summer as a landlord began with the sound of seagulls instead of shouting. The chaos was gone, replaced by order and the hum of steady business. My first renters, a couple from Chicago, arrived in late June. They paid $3,360 for a 5-night stay and left behind a note written on hotel stationery. "The sunrise here feels like a new start." I taped it inside the kitchen cabinet above the coffee mugs, a quiet reminder that peace can be profitable. July filled up quickly. Natalie, my property manager, sent detailed reports every week, check-ins, cleanings, maintenance logs, and balance sheets. The bookings came from families, small groups, and even a corporate team retreat that rented the entire house for a week at $6,800. By August, the house had hosted a book club getaway, a vow renewal, and a photography workshop. The income covered property insurance, utilities, and a year of maintenance reserves. Each monthly statement arrived with a line item that made me smile: net earnings. But calm rarely stays unchallenged. Daniel couldn't let go. He filed a petition in court claiming I was being manipulated, accusing Olivia and Natalie of controlling me. His lawyer, a young man clearly in over his head, tried to argue that my recent confusion warranted conservatorship. Olivia dismantled it in 2 hearings. When Grace presented the photos of the house manager router Daniel had secretly installed, along with emails proving he had tried to list the property for sale, the judge's tone shifted. Daniel skipped the next 2 hearings altogether. A week later, he changed tactics. 2 false complaints arrived from the city inspection office, claims of illegal events and unpermitted construction. Both were closed within 48 hours after inspectors found nothing but a freshly painted deck and legal rental permits. Olivia filed an affidavit with all the reports, reinforcing what we already knew. Daniel's actions were deliberate attempts to harass and discredit me. Still, he kept pushing. He messaged 2 renters directly, warning them they were being scammed and threatening legal action if they didn't vacate. I forwarded those messages to Grace, who traced the IP address back to Daniel's apartment in Charlotte. The next morning, Olivia filed for a restraining order. When Daniel's voicemails arrived, full of words like control, take over, and you'll regret this, we transcribed every one of them. The judge listened in silence, then signed the order without hesitation. It became permanent a month later. The air in my home felt lighter after that. Even the ocean sounded softer, as if it approved. Victor and Elaine, who had once cheered Daniel's manipulation, quietly disappeared after receiving Olivia's second letter. It listed the legal penalties for aiding a fraudulent real estate transaction and for filing false welfare reports. That letter carried weight, enough that Victor canceled his upcoming fishing trip to Charleston, and Elaine deleted every social media post that mentioned me. Their group chat fell silent. Kyra sent one final text that said, "I need space from all of this." I wrote back, "I hope you find peace." And that was it. I haven't heard from them since. By September, the rental account balance stood at $68,940 net profit. I paid the property taxes early for the small discount and hired a carpenter to repair the porch rail that had splintered during Daniel's party months earlier. I gave Natalie a $1,000 bonus and mailed Grace a leather notebook with gold-lined pages. Her thank you card said, "Strong women don't shout, they document." I smiled at that because it was true. Autumn came slowly, with warm afternoons and chilly mornings. I spent most days reading on the porch, my mother's quilt draped across my lap. The same master balcony Daniel once claimed as his stage had returned to its rightful peace. I'd sit there with my coffee, watching pelicans dive into the surf and sailboats drift across the horizon. The house no longer felt like a battleground. It felt like mine again. I keep all the paperwork in the study now in a thick folder labeled House, Ownership, 2025. It holds more than legal records. It holds my story, my deed, my doctor's letter, every photograph, email, and court transcript. Proof that I was not a confused old woman but a capable business owner who refused to be erased. People sometimes ask how I handled it all, how I stayed calm when my own son turned against me. I tell them the truth. I didn't fight with noise. I fought with paper and time. I verified ownership, documented everything, and called people who knew their jobs. I moved the house into a managed rental and let the numbers speak louder than emotion. When someone showed me who they were through deceit, I answered with records that couldn't lie. Now, my days are simple. I host small gatherings on weekends, friends from Cleveland who bring pierogies and laughter, neighbors who play jazz on the sand. Sometimes, when the weather's perfect, I rent the house for private dinners and donate the profits to a women's entrepreneurship fund in Charleston. Natalie handles the logistics. I just make sure the candles are lit and the music stays soft. The house earns, the ocean breathes, and my phone stays silent. I still think of Daniel sometimes, usually when I see fathers and sons walking along the beach together. I've learned to let that ache live quietly inside me. Forgiveness isn't weakness, it's a kind of release. But boundaries are not negotiable. My love for him remains, but it exists behind locked doors, like the folder in my study. If he ever decides to come back into my life, it won't be through lawyers or guilt. It'll be through a letter that begins with respect and ends with "I'm sorry." Until then, I wish him clarity and distance. Peace, I've learned, has a price. It costs you the illusion that family will always do right by you. It costs the comfort of old roles and familiar lies. But once you pay it, the return is freedom. Every morning now, I wake to the soft hush of waves, the scent of salt and coffee in the air, and the light slipping across the water like forgiveness itself. I walk barefoot on the deck, touch the railing that's finally sturdy again, and whisper, "Still mine." Because it is. The house. The peace. The life I built. All mine.